Why do people get into game journalism, Psy?
Well, like I said, so like we were talking about, most game journalists are basically fans, gamers themselves. They kind of get into it, and every gamer kind of harbors the dream that maybe they could make games, and um, so here you have a job where you get to play games, you get to write about games, you get to meet, potentially meet game developers, you get to go to game conferences and conventions. Okay, so you don't get paid very much, but hey, when you're when you're in your teens and 20s, like, you don't need to get paid a whole lot, right?
Money, who needs that?
Right. And so a lot was kind of like, what's kind of dangled in front of people, explicitly or kind of obliquely, is that, oh, well, you can get to know all these game developers, and then you can get a job doing game development. Because there's been a lot of high-profile game developers that have basically then went into game development and game consulting, or such like that. Ooh.
Oh, what's that?
I think that's one of the new guns added recently.
Maybe.
Trying for my Chroma Prime Systems blueprint. It's not good. Anyway, so
yeah, that's what I need to.
So you have the you have game developer or gamers who decide that they want to see this as kind of a way to get into the game industry. Like I said, there's been a number of game journalists, prominent game journalists, that eventually have essentially become game developers or consultants or whatnot. Mm-hmm. And so I think like a lot of that's kind of one of the carrots kind of dangled in front of the journalist, is that you will get access to this mysterious world, and you can potentially use your credentials as a game journalist to kind of get one of those rare. Right. And particularly with design, which is very hard to kind of break into, because everybody thinks they can do game design.
Oh, obviously. I mean, it's such a subjective thing.
Right. But again, if you claim that you've played every whatever first-person shooter or Space Ninja game or whatever, and then you go and talk to and then you go and talk to a company and kind of and brag about that being like something you've done professionally, that does kind of put you a cut ahead of a lot of other people who might think they can do design work themselves.
Right, but there is a difference between experiencing something from an appreciation perspective versus a ability to create perspective.
Oh, absolutely. But again, like I said, that like both the games journalism and the games industry kind of value this concept of the cheap replaceable worker. So
right.
But kind of going back to games, famously one of the most famous reviewers and movie critics, Robert Ebert, was kind of notoriously terrible at making movies. Mm-hmm. The movies he directed and wrote and whatnot are kind of pretty much seen as kind of universally terrible. Right. Despite him obviously having an eye for what makes a movie and what makes it what makes a decent movie. He just didn't have the ability to kind of take that knowledge and put it together into a coherent whole, and and so that's kind of the fallacy here of the journalism turned designer, is that even if you play every single Space Ninja game out there, that doesn't mean you're going to be able to make the next Warframe, right?
Right.
a lot of what like a lot of what makes specifically what makes Warframe here work was not obvious.
Yeah, there's a lot of internal design decisions made for the game that as
Right.
players we don't necessarily know how far that goes, what their
Right,
philosophy is.
Well, the big thing you don't know also is like the things they tried and they did they got killed before they were even released.
Mm-hmm.
Because like that's one of the issues. I think I mentioned this before as a game developer is that I've worked on about half a dozen projects that were never released because at some point they kind of decided, well, this is not going to work.
Right.
And so it wasn't because we were stupid and couldn't rub two brain cells together to figure out what makes that type of game work. It was just like, oh well, this is this goes beyond the budget that we anticipate, or this this is going to take longer, or like it's going to take more resources, or the market's changed.
Yeah, market conditions are actually a very interesting thing to talk about for game development, because I've heard of so many projects that were bound to be amazing things, but the market just wasn't aligned for that project at the time. Right.
There's kind of a danger if if you're targeting a certain platform, especially when you're talking about consoles and whatnot, where you release something for the console that's too early or too late.
Mm-hmm.
You either invest in a platform before it's really established, or you.
Oh, that's Chroma Prime for me.
Nice. Congratulations.
Yeah, there's a bunch of N64 games that were like that. Like they were slated to go on the N64, but it was so late in the lifespan of the console that they got sacked.
Right.
Because the GameCube was coming out and Nintendo was just kind of like, nah,
right.
We're good, thanks.
And you have a little bit of that, like with different PlayStations.
Mm-hmm.
Something that was released on PlayStation 2, then the PlayStation 3 comes out, the PlayStation 2 is no longer kind of the new hotness, and Sony's not giving so much attention to.
Actually, Final Fantasy 14 is kind of a interesting thing to happen where it outlived the PlayStation 3.
Right, and they stopped support for it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so they're in this really weird situation where they're like, okay, well, you guys are gonna have to upgrade or buy.
Right. Yeah, and that's kind of an interesting thing, yeah, because kind of you lose access to your thing. Luckily, I think they were pretty decent. There were a lot of people kind of like upgrade their licenses from 3 to 4 when they stopped support. But I remember like for the longest time, like a lot of times they're like, well, we could do this, but we can't because the PlayStation 3 won't support it. So
that's why DX11 took so long to be introduced.
Yeah.
Into the game, and yeah, a whole bunch of other things like that. Actually, Cell was telling me a story from 1.0 where the developers, I think it was when Yoshi took over, they released a press release apologizing that the graphics that they could not introduce rain droplets falling off your character while it was raining because the PS3 could not handle that level of detail. But it was an apology letter over rain droplet texture, like animations.
Right. I wonder if they included that in like some pre-rendered scene or something like that, and everybody's like expecting that, and they're like, ah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Maybe that is it. Because I thought it was really weird that they would be apologizing over something so minuscule, but maybe there was like a weird expectation at the time.
Right.
We're off topic though.
I guess we do as it happens. But yeah, so the desire to get into games journalism is usually not to like when somebody wants to go into journalism, like traditional journalism, usually it's like, well, I want to tell stories, I want to inform people, I want to do this, that, and the
I
other.
want to find the truth and
Right.
share it.
Right, and so like the reality is that most people in games journalism aren't looking at this as a long-term career, and like, to be frank, they probably shouldn't, because it's kind of a brutal industry, like it kind of chews people up, and it kind of expects the next person, if you don't like it, then the next person will gladly take your place.
Non-apologetic.
Right, and so. So this means that basically the game journalists are essentially going to be looking a lot more toward making nice with companies rather than giving honest opinion. And the flip side of that, of course, is like if a game journalist thinks that you, particularly indie people, aren't going to advance their career, well you can take a flying leap for all they care.
Right. Like, if you look at look up the coverage of Undertale, for example. Before it was super popular and like exploded the internet, there was no one talked about it until all of a sudden it was this mega game, and all of a sudden all the game journalists are saying it's 10 out of 10 best RPG ever made.
Right.
Just because then they can talk about it, and it can they can make money off of it.
Right. Yeah, they're talking about the new popular topic, and so they're essentially getting their clickbait.
But none of them really talk about Toby Fox as a developer, or where he came from, or
right.
how it developed out of Homestuck or anything like that. Like, none of them care about that. They just want to sell the hotness.
Right.
Which I had to look into all that stuff myself, and I'm like, oh, this is actually a really interesting story. It's too bad no one talks about it.
Yeah, no, I'm exactly the same way. Where I was kind of interested in finding out what was going on about that. Like, why is this game kind of so popular? And then like, once I kind of understand, and I think it was like you linked me the that video about the Homestuck.
The brief history,
yeah. I'm like, oh, well, that makes sense. That like you basically they were able to kind of tap into this existing fan base, and kind of get popular. And not to say that it's a bad game, that they cheated or anything like that, but like.
Oh no, he just had an audience to start with.
Right.
Which
right.
Imagine trying to make a game like what we're doing with this podcast, where we have a core audience of 5 to 10 viewers at a given night. Like, that's gonna take a long time to accumulate and build up and market.
Right.
If you have an audience of I don't know how big the fandom is. I forget what the numbers. 500,000 people. Let's just throw that number out. Like,
right, freaking huge.
yeah, exactly. Like, you're why wouldn't you use those connections?
Right. And Toby Fox and whatnot, like, he did build up those connections. Not like he just kind of woke up one day like, these 4 million people are gonna worship me, I think.
Right.
I mean, it did take him a while to kind of build up those things.
And he was like a contributor to the community.
Right. And he basically happened to get followers from this thing. He kind of hit upon something when it was popular before it became but was a genuine contributor, not just basically somebody who was super opportunistic.
Right, exactly. And so, like, all the fame and popularity he got, he earned that. No matter what you say about him or his game or the community that I came out of, he earned what he got out of that.
Right, right. But I think the danger we run into here is kind of thinking that like this type of thing is, you know, like a natural foregone conclusion. Like, you know, oh, good games will just get this attention. It's like, no. You know, you know, a game, you know, oftentimes a game that kind of comes out of nowhere has some other reason for being popular. And you know, to tie back to our topic here, like the, you know, games journalists are not going to kind of, you know, aren't looking for your, you know, beautiful hidden gems so they can talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
If anything, they, you know, they you know, they're looking for that game that they can kind of put down. So like, you know, so people are gonna say, oh, well, you just, you know, you just praise anything. It's like, no, look at this indie game over here. I think it sucks. They get no coverage. Like, it sucks.
And you actually had that issue with Meridian, if you want to go into that.
Right, right. Yeah. So like, you know, when we were shutting down Meridian, when I had when I was closing it down, and because we lost our billing provider, you know, when I ran it, it was never a huge game, but it, you know, it wasn't, you know. You know, it had a player base. It kind of supported me for a bit at a minimal level, and you know, and I ran a business off of it. But it was definitely no World of Warcraft. Well, you can say pretty easily. But yeah, like, so I had this company. This I actually had well, even before that, when we were first starting, like, you know, we got contacted by PC Gamer. And they're like, hey, we're gonna do an MMO issue. We'd love to, you know, kind of to feature Meridian. This is like, yeah, this is pretty close to when we, you know, bought the game from 3DO and relaunched it. And like, hey, we would love to kind of just, you know, to do a little bit on you. Like, can you give some information? Like, oh yeah, great. Like, you know, like we were thinking this was gonna be a big thing. So like, you know, they were somewhere on the East Coast, and like, you know, my business partner and his brother and one of our other guys was over in Connecticut, and so we bought a fancy new laptop to show it off, the game off on. We basically, you know, like, they all piled in the car, went to their offices, and like, you know, we were kind of told that like, hey, this is gonna be a big thing, and you know, everybody's very excited to talk to you. I'm like, great, you know, like this is great. But then when we got there, we kind of got fobbed off on this other person that, you know, we had not talked to at all. They, you know, they acted completely bored and uninterested in anything we had to say. And then, you know, when the issue came out, we got basically like a tiny little blurb, just like any other game.
Right.
Yeah, and like they called us a throwback. It's like, well, that's nice. Yeah. Thanks, I guess. Like, you know.
Oh, the pain.
Right.
Like, what year was that? Do you remember? I'm just trying to get my, you know, internal.
It would have been in the early 2000s.
Okay.
I don't remember specifically.
So like EverQuest and.
Well, I mean, yeah. So yeah, the EverQuest 2 actually was just coming out.
Okay, the 3D games were out.
Right. And so like so basically the big thing was yeah, so that was kind of like the punchline was that, you know, like EverQuest 2 was just announced, and like, you know, they got the front cover. There's 2 full page ads in the it wasn't released yet, but they were obviously kind of building up the hype.
Right. The pre-purchase advertisements and all that.
Right. They got the cover. They got, you know, they had 2 full page ads in there. They had an article written specifically about them. It's like, oh, I can see, you know, who's obviously the favorite one. Ooh, hello.
I'm stuck under geometry.
Always some excuse for you, isn't there?
Oh my goodness. Oh. Okay, I made it. I'm safe. Oh, oxygen. Holy crap.
That should keep you going for a while.
Oh my.
Life support.
Yeah, and so you definitely had kind of this expectation, you know, like, it was very obvious, like I said, what the expectations were. And then later, when, you know, to go kind of continue the story I was starting to tell, when we were closing down the game because we had lost our billing provider, and I really didn't want to, you know, keep on paying business taxes on something that I wasn't making money off of. We had this I think it was a Kotaku, basically like I can write up this like super snarky, really fucking rude uh, news story about us, going, oh, you know, Near Death Studios, and we can't blame you if you haven't heard of them before. It's like, well, you know, we're obviously popular enough for you to write an article about, and like, you know, and like, you know, just, you know, it's got some basic factual things wrong. You know, it's very obvious this person was a lot more interested in basically just being kind of a snarky asshole.
And cracking jokes at your expense. And...
Right. Near Death Studios, ironically named. Like, no, that was actually kind of intentional.
Right.
And like, you know, the thing I kind of point out was that you know, the site basically, like, you know, had an article talking about EA shutting down the servers for some of their sports games, their multiplayer sports games. And, you know, and like, you know, like it was like a super dry. It was like, yeah, they're shutting down these, you know, it's like, well, I mean, like, there's fans of those games, like, but of course, like, EA buys advertising, and, you know, Indie that's going out of business does not.
Right.
Finish your mission and we'll take a look inside.
And that's kind of just the sad truth of money.
Right.
Just
right.
Money buys tone.
Right. And I think that, you know, like that's game journalism as in its purest form there, where you had, you know, like you know, a game that a lot of people, you know, like, you know, that was being run by a few people as a labor of love gets mocked, you know. Company that shuts down, you know, multiplayer servers, you know, because they're, you know, they just don't feel like supporting them anymore, gets, you know, a press release, you know, basically gets a regurgitated press release.
And I'm trying to remember, because that sounds reminiscent of how games for Windows Live got shut down and how that got covered.
Yeah.
Because it just made me think about that, because that was a huge frustration for me. Because I had a ton of Windows games for Windows Live games. Red Faction Guerrilla, Fable 3, whole bunch of other ones that I can't even, I don't even play anymore, but they're on my Steam list. And, like, there were a bunch of news articles that, you know, get linked on the Steam, the Steam pages, how they have, like, their news things.
Right.
But it was just like, when games for Windows Live shut down, too bad for the players.
Right.
I'm just like, yeah, could you imagine someone being snarky towards Windows?
Right.
Like everyone snarks Windows behind their back, but nobody would actually put a publication of snark.
Right.
Or else they'd lose their computer.
Their Windows license mysteriously gets revoked.
Oh, that would be great. Ooh. Oh, so many good things. I can't decide.
I think the Cronin Prime blade, I think that's the last thing I need for Cronin Prime. So.
Nice.
Yeah, and so, I mean, let's extract.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm already extraction, so.
But
guess,
yeah, Dejara said, I guess you never read a John Dvorak column. I'm not sure who that is.
Oh. he's somebody kind of notoriously hates on Microsoft.
Oh, okay. I mean, I stand corrected then. Yes, I've never read this man's column.
He writes for a more general tech publication, so.
Gotcha.
But yeah, but I mean, like, you know, yeah, trying to imagine someone, you know, like, trying to imagine like a game journalist bad mouthing Sony or Xbox or Nintendo or, like, you know, just kind of like, you know, completely talking shit about them, like.
Oh, if a journalist badmouthed Nintendo in general,
Right.
all hell would break loose. Because, you know, Nintendo's the little brother you just want to pet. You know?
Right. Right.
That is literally stabbing you in the leg, but you can't tell that.
But it's like, oh.
Look at him, he's so murderous.
Yes, Crown Prime.
Oh my god.
Damn it. I think I got the rewards from that first mission, but yeah.